My name is Cesar Bustamante Jr. I am a freelance journalist and a part-time archivist at the New York Daily News, and my age is 28, getting up there. I grew up in Philippines from the ages 1 through 4, and after that, I grew up in in the U.S., mostly in New York, but for a small part of the time in California. It's a strange journey altogether. It was a bunch of moving around. But for most of my life, I grew up in Queens, New York. In terms of how that has actually impacted my journey, part of it is just being the first generation in New York, in the U.S. itself. It's a bit troubling, or a little bit harder, just because your parents are immigrants and working really hard to make ends meet, but also just because they're not aware a lot about the land, just kind of what is important in terms of your education or your finances sometimes. And a lot of that I had to work on my own. God bless my parents for helping me survive pretty much and give me that level of support. But in a ways, it did force me to be more independent and very hardworking in my attempt to better myself, because they just weren't aware of special programs that would help me, or how accessible things were for people like me, and I had to find that out myself. I went to public school throughout all my life, including undergraduate and grad school. In undergrad, I went to Queens College, and in grad school, I went to CUNY Grad School of Journalism. That was a new program located right behind the New York Times building, so it was pretty cool. In terms of odd jobs that I've had to take, I was I was an assistant to the director of this program called College Now, which pretty much meant I had to do manual labor and anything that she needed done, from making calls to giving food to a bunch of high school students. The program itself kind of made me aware of just the amounts of things that are available for high school students, and I wish I took advantage of as much when I was in high school. But that was during undergrad college, and it was enlightening, because you realize that there are routes to expanding yourself. Actually, one odd job was taking videos of all the NYPD and FDNY offices throughout Manhattan. So that just meant, really, for the longest time, I scaled all of Manhattan to get those shots, sometimes getting shooed away by the cops, but I got my shots just for this video production company. I am currently at the New York Daily News as a part-time archivist. I got there because of my connections to my grad school, where one of the professors knew I was looking for a more stable job instead of just freelancing, which is great, by the way. I did enjoy that, but at a certain point I was looking for something that could provide me with a little more steadier income, and he knew that I had a background while I was in grad school in doing research. I helped produce this book on the history of Wall Street in New York. So And so I got that uh, call from him and just said they're looking for someone to help with this project about looking up old articles and putting it on the web. Would you like to try that out? And I did, and it's been pretty good for the past, I think, over 6 months now. Going into the office and transcribing really old articles that I've requested. It's a mixture of researching events that have happened in the past and finding out articles that would generate traffic for the website, because of special anniversaries, or because we assume that people would like to read these articles because of the quality of the work, the importance of the author, or the prominence and relevance it adds towards current discussions in the news. For example, recently they just made a decision on a case of an abduction over 10 years ago, and I had to pick that up, transcribe it, and put it on the web so that people who were curious about the original, very first reporting of that incident could check that out. So it's really fun, especially old photos. I recently did the article on the Hindenburg, and that was just bonkers crazy. Teenage self, I look back at my teenage self, and I really kind of feel like I did a majority of things right. I took on every single opportunity I could, from working in the school newspaper to writing for the literary journal at the school, and taking an opportunity of taking some college courses and advanced classes, just because I was curious and trying really hard to be brilliant. I guess what advice I would give myself is, as a teenager, would be this is hard. Look up a book in time management. That was the hardest part. Going into college and going into even now. Going back to the statement earlier that I just had to work harder because of where my parents came from and how they just weren't as aware as other parents would be, who might have gone to college in the US as opposed to going to school in the Philippines. What that meant was I understood doing work or falling behind or like failing as an issue of myself, that I wasn't just trying hard enough. In truth, looking back, it was probably because I burnt myself out, or I didn't cut time properly. There is a point where you need to understand that that sometimes you should actually spend for yourself, and sometimes you should dedicate to your work, but you need to understand the development of routines that work for you, the tools that would help you, from priority list to to-do list to a calendar. Those were things that I was playing around with when I was in high school, but I didn't have like a structured system.